In this section of Chapter 2, Chapter 2.4, we're going to look at biological macromolecules. And so in this section, we're going to look at defining polymer and monomer, and then we're going to look at the four major types of macromolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and then nucleic acids. So to begin with, what is a macromolecule? Well, as it states on page 39 of your textbook, macromolecules, macro means large, so they're large organic molecules. We could also call them polymers, and they are made of what we call monomer subunits. So with these two terms, polymer and monomer, monomers typically are the ingredients. Polymers are the product they're going to be made. And so as you join individual monomers together, you build a polymer. So there's four major macromolecules that we look at in living organisms, and they are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So let's look at carbohydrates first. Carbohydrates are the major source of energy in our cells, and in some textbooks they consider carbohydrates to be your immediate energy source. So when a living thing needs energy, the first thing they go to break down would be the carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are made of sugar monomer subunits. And so listed below are the different types of sugar monomers. So we have what are known as monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Now, mono means one, so a monosaccharide is just one sugar. Disaccharides would be two sugars. Polysaccharides would be multiple sugars, all of which build carbohydrates. Now, if we look at specific examples, monosaccharides are single sugars. Those would include things like glucose and fructose. We know glucose, that would be like blood sugar. Fructose would be the sugar that's found obviously in fruits. Disaccharides are where you join two monosaccharides together, and it builds things like sucrose or table sugar. Polysaccharides, on the other hand, are where you take multiple monosaccharides and put them together. And so some examples of these would be serving structural elements, or serving to be structural elements, like cellulose that's found in the cell walls of plants, or chitin that's found in the exoskeleton of certain animals like insects and spiders and lobsters. Polysaccharides would also build up things like peptidoglycan that makes the cell walls of bacteria. So very strong materials fall under the category of polysaccharides. The second macromolecule that we look at would be proteins. Now, if you recall, carbohydrates were mainly just sources of energy, whereas proteins have multiple functions in a cell. So first off, they're the structural components of cells. So portions of the cell membrane are made of proteins. We know that proteins form animal muscle cells. So when you take Anatomy 1, for some of you, you'll learn about certain proteins like myosin and actin that form our muscles. They form enzymes, and we'll talk a little bit later on, but enzymes, we know, accelerate, or they speed up chemical reactions. They act as catalysts. We also know that proteins form channels through which substances can be transported in or out of the cell. So some very common examples of proteins that we see in the human body. We see things like hemoglobin. That's what carries the oxygen in red blood cells. Keratin, which is a protein that makes your skin, nails, and hair hard. A lot of hormones are either proteins or are regulated by proteins. And then collagen, a very important protein found in our connective tissues that helps to strengthen as well as give them some flexibility. Now, proteins, we know, are made of amino acid monomers. Remember, carbohydrates are made of sugars. Proteins are made of amino acids. There are 20 different types of amino acids that you find in living things, and these amino acids are joined together by what we call peptide bonds. And so as you join different amino acids in different combinations, you build different proteins. It's kind of like there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, but as you rearrange those letters, you build different words. Well, there's only 20 amino acids, but as you rearrange them, you build different proteins. So again, amino acids bound together by what we call peptide bonds. And so if you get enough of those together, you build what we call polypeptides. The third type of carbohydrate is a lipid. Now, a couple things to know about lipids is that first off, they are hydrophobic. So remember, hydrophobic means it will not dissolve in water. It's water-fearing, and it's made of hydrocarbons. So if you look at some examples here like fat, phospholipids, steroids, all of these are made of carbon bound to hydrogen with fatty acid tails. Now, there's three types of lipids that we see. First being fats. Fats are made of glycerol and 3 fatty acids. Fats are important because they store energy. Remember, carbohydrates were your immediate energy. Fats are your long-term energy storage. Another example of lipids would be steroids. Steroids are made of carbon rings, 4 of them that have been fused together. Examples of living steroids in living things. Now, these are not the illegal steroids that are used in athletics, but these would be things like cholesterol and the sex hormones. We know cholesterol helps to strengthen the plasma membrane, maintain its fluidity. We know sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen and progesterone have very important effects on males and females. A third example of lipids would be the phospholipids. Phospholipids are made of glycerol, fatty acids, and a phosphate. And these are very, very important because they compose cell membranes. And we know that every living thing contains a cell membrane, whether it be humans, other animals, plants, even bacteria contain cell membranes. And then finally, the last type of macromolecule would be nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are made of what we call nucleotide monomers. A nucleotide is a unit that's made of a sugar, a phosphate, and a base. So when you look at some of the most common types of nucleic acids like DNA and RNA, you would notice that both of these are made of sugars, phosphates, and bases. Their functions are different though. RNA functions in protein synthesis, the building of proteins, whereas DNA functions in storing your genetic information. But both of these made of nucleotides, which again are a phosphate, a sugar, and a base.